Chapter 1. The Beast is Born. Some men are remembered for their kindness, others for their cruelty, but few are remembered for being called, by their own mother, the Beast of the Apocalypse. This is where the story of Andrew Aleister Crowley begins, a boy born into strict religion, destined to become the world's most infamous occultist, the man the press would later call, whispered emphasis, the wickedest man alive. But Crowley's story is not only one of scandal and ritual, it is a story of power, a story of imagination, unleashed without restraint. And it is here, in the shadows of his childhood, that we begin our journey into the zone of the unseen. Edward Alexander Crowley, known later as Aleister, was born in 1875. His family was wealthy, but bound by iron chains of religion. The Plymouth Brethren, a sect where fire and brimstone ruled every word. His father was a preacher, a man who poured his fortune into spreading scripture, drilling into young Andrew the language of sin, punishment, and eternal damnation. But when his father died of tongue cancer, the boy's world turned black. His mother, overwhelmed by grief and rage, lashed out. She called him the Beast. 666. Not as a joke, not in anger alone. She meant it. And instead of recoiling, young Crowley embraced it. He began to see himself not as a sinner, but as destiny incarnate. At school, he became known for cruelty, for defiance. He tortured animals. He seduced maids. He plotted against teachers. By the time most children were still learning their alphabets, Crowley was writing poetry about death, about power, about the abyss. This was not mischief. This was the germ of something darker, a child who had been given a prophecy and believed it. And here we see the first trace of the unseen. His mother's curse became his self-image, and self-image hardened into destiny. Years later, Neville Goddard would say, "Imagination creates reality." For Crowley, it was the imagination of others, their fear, their prophecy, that created his reality. He did not fight the label of beast. He became it. But this was only the beginning. From the death of his father, the curse of his mother, and the cruelty of his youth, Crowley would rise into secret societies. He would unlock forbidden rituals, and he would ignite scandals so shocking that even the tabloids of his day trembled to print them. And yet, his influence still echoes in Hollywood and in music today. Andrew Crowley was not born wicked. He was forged by religion, by grief, by prophecy. And when he embraced the name of Beast, he stepped across a line few dare to cross. He began walking not in the world of men, but in the zone of the unseen. Chapter 2. Into the Secret Orders. By the end of his teenage years, Andrew Crowley was already a rebel without limits. Wealth, intelligence, and arrogance fueled him, but his appetite for the forbidden would soon lead him into halls where few dared to tread. The Secret Orders of Magic. In 1898, Crowley discovered the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a society whispered about among poets, mystics, and intellectuals. Its members claimed to hold the ancient keys of Egypt, the secrets of alchemy, and the power of ritual magic. To young Crowley, this was no parlor trick. It was destiny. The beast had found his temple. The Golden Dawn was not a simple fraternity. It was structured like a ladder to heaven, or perhaps a staircase into the abyss. Initiations, secret passwords, and robes marked with cryptic symbols. Among its ranks were men of culture and fame, poets like William Butler Yeats, actors, surgeons, and politicians, all of them seeking what religion had failed to give them: power over the unseen. But Crowley was not content to be a student. He wanted to lead, and his ambition soon turned the order into chaos. He clashed with Yeats, accusing him of being a hypocrite. He defied his superiors, demanding rituals reserved for higher grades. He performed his own experiments in secrecy, altering incantations, bending invocations to his own will. Soon whispers filled the temple halls. This young man was dangerous, reckless, perhaps even cursed. And then came the scandal. Crowley attempted a takeover in one of the most bizarre occult dramas of the age. He stormed the Golden Dawn's London temple with hired muscle. Locked doors were forced open, ritual chambers desecrated, a magical coup d'etat. The result? Exile, banished from the order. But Crowley would not stop. If the Golden Dawn rejected him, he would build a temple of his own. In 1904, while in Cairo with his new wife Rose, Crowley claimed to have received a revelation. During a series of mystical trances, Rose began speaking strange words as if possessed. Crowley, intrigued, followed her lead into ritual. And there, he said, a voice spoke to him, a voice calling itself, I was. For 3 days, this entity dictated a text to him, word for word. Crowley called it the Book of the Law. Its message was simple, terrifying, and intoxicating. Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law. This was no longer the creed of Christianity. This was no longer the rigid law of his childhood. It was liberation without morality, desire without chains, will as the only law. Crowley declared this the foundation of a new religion, Thelema. And from this moment on, he was not simply a magician, he was a prophet. But prophets invite disciples, and disciples invite scandal, because Crowley's rituals would not be confined to candles and chants. They would spill into blood, drugs, and forbidden sexuality. The press would soon feast on him like vultures, and the world would soon know his name. And here again, the unseen principle reveals itself. In Neville Goddard's world, imagination creates reality through faith, discipline, and love. But in Crowley's world, imagination was a weapon. Desire itself became ritual, and ritual reshaped the lives of those who followed him. The same law, used in 2 different ways, creation or corruption. By the time the ink dried on the Book of the Law, Crowley was no longer Andrew, no longer Aleister, no longer merely the beast. He was becoming a cultural force, one whose shadow would stretch far beyond secret temples, into scandal, into Hollywood, into music itself. And in the next chapter, we descend into the scandals that would crown him with infamy and seal his title as the wickedest man alive. Aleister Crowley had crowned himself prophet of a new religion, Thelema. His creed was simple: do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. But the world was not ready for what this meant in practice, because for Crowley, will was expressed not in prayer, but in pleasure, not in obedience, but in excess. And his pursuit of that creed would shock the world. He began to practice what he called sex magic, the belief that ritual power could be unlocked through forbidden acts of intimacy, that ecstasy itself could tear a hole in reality. For Crowley, every embrace was a ceremony, every indulgence an invocation, and every partner became a vessel for his rituals. Soon whispers spread of orgies in candlelit chambers, of rituals drenched in incense and in blood. The newspapers caught wind, and the myth of Crowley, the perverse, the dangerous, the beast, began to grow. By 1920, He had founded a commune in Sicily, the Abbey of Thelema, a crumbling farmhouse transformed into a temple. Its walls were painted with obscene murals, demons intertwined with angels, naked bodies locked in ritual poses. Every corner dripped with symbolism and sin. His followers and a small band of devoted seekers lived under his command. They took new names, they performed daily rituals, and they surrendered themselves completely to the will of their master. But life at the Abbey was no paradise. It was a descent into chaos. Drugs flowed freely, opium, cocaine, hashish. Crowley himself spiraled into addiction, his health wasting away even as his legend grew. One follower, Raoul Loveday, died under mysterious circumstances. Some claimed it was from contaminated water. Others whispered it was the rituals themselves. The British press erupted. Headlines screamed of human sacrifice, satanic rites, and orgies that mocked heaven itself. The tabloids called him the wickedest man alive, and Crowley loved it. He fed on infamy. He relished the outrage. Every scandal, every headline was fuel for his myth. To his critics, he was a degenerate. To his followers, he was a prophet. And to the curious masses, he became something even more dangerous, a figure of fascination. And here, the unseen truth emerges again. For Neville Goddard, imagination was the key to salvation. For Crowley, imagination was theater. Scandal was spell work. By shaping how the world imagined him, Crowley shaped his reality. He wanted to be seen as the beast. So he performed the beast for the cameras and the papers until they could not look away. He understood the law of attention. Whoever controls the story controls the mind. But Crowley's story was far from over. Even as he descended into addiction and scandal, his influence spread like smoke. Musicians, poets, and even filmmakers would soon pick up the torch. From the Beatles to Led Zeppelin to Jay-Z, Crowley's philosophy would bleed into the very bloodstream of modern culture. In the next chapter, we uncover how the wickedest man alive became the secret muse of Hollywood and music, and how his fingerprints still mark the entertainment industry today. Chapter 4. Hollywood Music and the Legacy of the Beast Aleister. Crowley died in 1947, but the story did not end there. In fact, his influence only grew stronger, because his ideas, his image, his very shadow, slipped into the bloodstream of popular culture. And even now, you can see his fingerprints on Hollywood, on music, and on the artists who shape our world. Let's begin with a simple album cover. In 1967, the Beatles released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, a psychedelic explosion of color and faces. And in the top row, peering from the back, stands none other than Aleister Crowley. John Lennon admitted it. The Beatles wanted Crowley on the cover because he represented, in Lennon's words, the whole idea of doing what you want. That's Thelema. Do what thou wilt. Disguised as counterculture, the world's most famous band publicly linked their rebellion to the wickedest man alive. But it didn't stop there. Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin, one of the most influential guitarists in history, became obsessed with Crowley. He collected Crowley's books, he studied his rituals, and he even purchased Crowley's former home, Boleskine House, on the shores of Loch Ness. It was in that house years before that Crowley claimed to have summoned demons and failed to banish them. Locals said the land was cursed. Page lived there anyway. And Led Zeppelin's music, layered with symbols, runes, and whispers of the occult. From there, Crowley's shadow crept further. Ozzy Osbourne wrote an entire song about him, simply titled Mr. Crowley. David Bowie referenced him. Iron Maiden invoked him. Even Jay-Z has been photographed wearing a shirt with the words, "Do what thou wilt." Think about that. From the Beatles to Zeppelin to modern hip-hop icons, the slogan of Crowley's religion still walks the stage. And what about Hollywood? His influence is harder to trace, but everywhere to feel. The image of the occult magician, the robed figure in candlelight, the secret society pulling strings from the shadows. All of these tropes echo Crowley's life. Directors from Kenneth Anger, who was a devoted follower, to Stanley Kubrick, who littered his films with occult imagery, borrowed from the same well Crowley dug. The sex ritual in Eyes Wide Shut, the obsession with symbols in The Ninth Gate, the constant return of secret societies in thrillers and horror films. All of it feels like Crowley's theater. The beast lives on in cinematic archetypes. Here's the unseen truth. Crowley understood, more than anyone, that symbols outlive flesh. That myth is stronger than the man who wears it. He cultivated scandal because he knew scandal would echo. He embraced the title of beast because he knew the world would remember it, and he seeded his philosophy into art so it would travel further than his body ever could. This is the law of the unseen. Plant a symbol and it grows into culture. Plant an idea and it rewrites generations. So when you hear Lennon say he wanted to do what he wanted, when you see Jimmy Page standing inside Boleskine House, when you see Jay-Z on stage in a shirt that reads, "Do what thou wilt," ask yourself, is this coincidence or is it proof that Crowley's imagination is still shaping our reality? In the next chapter, we'll return to the heart of the zone of the unseen, and we'll ask the ultimate question. What does it mean when two men, Neville Goddard and Aleister Crowley, both understood that imagination creates reality, but chose to use it in opposite ways? Chapter 5. Crowley, Neville, and the zone of the unseen two men. Two visions of the unseen. Aleister Crowley, the self-proclaimed beast. Neville Goddard, the quiet prophet of imagination. Both men believed reality was not solid, that it could be bent, shaped, created. But where Neville saw light, Crowley chased shadows. Neville Goddard taught imagination creates reality, that every man and woman carries within them the creative power of God, that by feeling the wish fulfilled, life itself bends to your vision. He spoke of revision, of planting scenes in the mind until they bloom into fact. He taught love, forgiveness, and divine order. For Neville, the unseen was a doorway to heaven. But for Aleister Crowley, the unseen was a weapon. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It was freedom without guardrails, power without compassion, desire without restraint. Where Neville's imagination opened the gates of heaven, Crowley's imagination pried open the doors of hell. And yet, both men proved the same law. Imagination creates reality. Crowley bent it toward chaos. Neville bent it toward love. So the question lingers, what will you bend it toward? Because the zone of the unseen is not just history, it is here, now, waiting for you to choose. Will you choose Neville's light or Crowley's fire? Will you shape your world through love or through fear? The unseen is listening, and it will echo whatever you dare to imagine. This has been the story of Aleister Crowley, the wickedest man alive. But it is only one shadow in the labyrinth of the unseen. If you felt the pull of mystery tonight, if you felt the weight of imagination's power, then stay with us. Subscribe, return, step beyond the veil, and together we will journey deeper into the zone of the unseen.